This is the same expression that I made last night, but with a whole different meaning. Steve Kerr, the sabotager, came back with an absolute vengeance in this game. You know, right now is a very scandalous time in the NBA, and I feel like Steve Kerr needs to be investigated because what he did in this game, I mean, he really toyed with the game and through this game really early on. He made a mockery of the game of basketball with the things that he did in this game. And the sad thing about it is that Steph Curry, despite being on the second end of a back-to-back, was on fire still, 16 points in that first quarter, and the Warriors came out to a good start. But no. The things that Steve Kerr did in this game needs to be investigated because no sane coach would do these things intentionally thinking that this is going to be good for his team or is going to give his team an advantage in any kind of way. I mean, the lineups that were used by Steve Kerr tonight were insane even by Steve Kerr's standards. I have actually never seen him do some of the stuff that he did in this game. He put Jimmy Butler at the center spot. He put Kuminga at the center spot. And he put Guy Santos at the center spot. And he put basically a 5-guard lineup at one point in this game. We're going to go over all the crimes that were committed in this game. And if that sounds good to you, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. So as you know, last night I gave praise to Steve Kerr and complimented him for willing to use a bigger lineup to close against the Nuggets. He went with the lineup of Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Kuminga, Draymond, and Al Horford. And as it turns out, not surprisingly, it wasn't Steve Kerr's idea. Steve Kerr acknowledged in the post-game press conference last night that it was Terry Stotts and Chris DeMarco who actually came to him and suggested that they try the big lineup with Al Horford at the center spot to close the game. I want you to think about this very carefully. It wasn't just Terry Stotts and it wasn't just Chris DeMarco. It was the both of them going to Steve Kerr, practically ambushing him in real time so that Steve Kerr essentially has no choice but to try it out because clearly those two guys in front of the coaching staff and other guys that are on the team pitched this idea to Steve. And how is Steve Kerr going to say no in that situation? Basically, he was forced into saying yes, and you know he doesn't want to do it because it was acknowledged by Steph Curry after the game that lineup, that closing lineup, was never even tried in the preseason during their practices. Think about that for a second. Al Horford is their prized acquisition in the offseason. He, next to Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green, those four veterans are clearly the best players on this team. And the coach of the team didn't once think to run that lineup at some point. You know, some people will say, oh, Steve Kerr is such a good coach because he's willing to listen to his assistants and people on the team. The fact of the matter is that he hasn't been doing that. And like I said, he was ambushed last night by two guys and got pressured into making that decision. And again, the fact that somebody who's supposed to be a mastermind of this team has been on this team for over a decade should know this team inside out, what works and what doesn't, completely and utterly. So the charlatan nature of Steve Kerr continues. But I had a lot of hope. I tried to be positive. I tried to give compliments and have maybe a false sense of faith that Steve Kerr was going to be different and change this season. And clearly, that is so far from the case. I think this guy is an absolute egomaniac. I think he was upset that he got ambushed last night. So even though to start this game against the Blazers tonight, he decided to continue the theme of going bigger, and he decided to put Quinton Post into the starting lineup so that the Warriors starting lineup would be Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Kuminga, Draymond, and Post. Put Paz on the bench, which I'm sure made a lot of people in the fan base happy. And honestly, I don't have a whole lot of faith in Quinton Post to be a reliable starting center for this team whenever Al Horford is out. But putting Quinton Post into the equation does do something very important for this team, and that is taking some pressure off of Draymond and Jimmy Butler from having to be the team's power forward and center full time. And despite having some rebound issues in the early going, because Quinton Post is not a good rebounder, not a strong guy in terms of boxing his man out, despite being a 7-footer, the Warriors still got off to a pretty good start. They got off to a 12-4 start. So once again, they got off to an early lead. And although it was a bit up and down, the Warriors were mostly winning that first quarter, which is great. Not only that, once Quinton Post sat, Steve Kerr brought in Trey Jackson-Davis as a rotational center. That's also good. And then Steph Curry started to go off, and he had 16 points in that first quarter, not skipping a beat, 4 of 6 from the three-point line. He was on absolute fire. And then he took a seat, and Jimmy Butler was at the power forward spot, Trace is at the center spot, and the lineup looks pretty decent. And things were going fine. Trace was doing some good things out there at that center spot. And then there was a defensive stop in transition. Trace was able to leak out, receive the pass right underneath the rim. There was one guy that he had to get through, so he Euro stepped, but then he was just a little bit underneath the rim and left the layup really short, which to me is just insane. I don't understand how a guy like Trey Jackson-Davis, who is a really great athlete, can just go up so softly. Go up and dunk the ball. It's really that simple. There's no reason for Trace to be doing cutesy layups. He should be going up, trying to dunk the ball, and put the ball in the rim every single time. It's a really bizarre thing to watch somebody, again, who is so athletic, lack the confidence to just play above the rim like he's capable of playing. I mean, at this point, I think TJD needs to go and see a psychologist to get his confidence level up, because his mentally something is off there. But that goofy layup aside, he was doing his job at the center spot and keeping the lineup relatively balanced. But soon after, I guess Steve Kerr is looking for any reason to sit either TJD or Guy Santos and take them off the floor so that he can play 3-guard lineups and tonight 4-guard lineups. And yes, watching TJD miss that one layup is frustrating, but it's one layup, one possession at the end of the day. You can't overreact to that, yank him, and do what Steve Kerr ended up doing. He decided to go as tiny as humanly possible. He put Jimmy Butler on the back end of a back-to-back at the center spot to close quarter one. Look at the lineup that Steve Kerr put out there to end the first quarter. Pat Spencer, Potts, Will Richard, Moses Moody, and Jimmy Butler. You know, in the closing lineup last night, Jimmy Butler was at the shooting guard spot. So guess what? This actually is a 5-guard lineup that Steve Kerr put out there. A lot of people joked about how Steve Kerr will one day put out a 5-guard lineup. And this insane individual actually did this, taxing the hell out of Jimmy Butler, forcing him to play the anchor position defensively. He thinks that he's somehow matching the smallness of the Blazers, but the Blazers have more 6'7" guys on the floor than a bunch of 6'3", 6'4" guys. There's a huge difference. This lineup that Steve Kerr put out there, that is a high school lineup. That is a high school size lineup, and it would be the smallest lineup in all of the college divisions. This is the NBA. This is not the Filipino League. So the Warriors initially had an 8-point lead before Steve Kerr decided to make this move, and then the Blazers, not surprisingly, went on a 9-1 run. Jimmy Butler at the center spot. He can't do anything. Nobody can do anything. You have 4 guards on the floor. Who's screening for who? The basic fundamentals of organized basketball is gone at this point. And next thing you know, the Blazers gain all the confidence in the world. They will go on to outscore the Warriors in the first half, 50-29, and the Blazers ended up scoring 69 points in the first half. I have been warning through the first 2 games, despite the fact that the Warriors won those games, that the Warriors are showing serious signs of defensive issues. This team right now can't guard anybody in different sections of this game. This roster is a defensive disaster right now. They're clearly missing any kind of reliable POA, and without multiple defensive guys on your roster, your team can never truly be a serious contender. And sure, the fans can just forget all that and just be happy with the fact that they're 2-0. But really, it took Steph Curry pulling a win out of his ass last night because the Warriors should have lost that game against the Nuggets. So they really should have lost last night's game, and they ended up losing tonight's game badly. And the Warriors should actually be 1-2 right now. Things aren't going as well as you would like to believe. This team has a lot of defensive issues, and honestly, a lot of it is being manufactured by Steve Kerr and his nonsensical lineups. And the insanity of going absolutely tiny did not stop in that first quarter. In the second quarter, once again, we saw Jimmy Butler at the center spot, put Kuminga at the power forward spot where we do not want him to be at, next to 3 other guards. 6'2", 6'2", 6'4" on the floor at the same time, next to Kuminga, who's not a 4, and next to Jimmy Butler, who's not a 5. Everybody is out of position, and the Warriors can't stop anybody literally. Think about this for a second. The score with about 3.5 minutes left in that second quarter was 51-51. Like I told you, the Blazers scored 69 points in that first half. Do you know what that means? In the final 3.5 minutes, the Blazers scored 18 points. And yes, when you put out a lineup out there that is the equivalent of a high school team size, these are the kinds of disasters that can happen. I feel like there was a number of things going on there. I think the whole thing started and precipitated when Trayce Jackson-Davis ended up missing that layup and Steve Kerr decided to lose his mind and completely overreact and decide that he doesn't need anybody who's capable of playing the center spot or the power forward spot on the floor at the same time. But I also wonder simultaneously if this was his retribution, his retaliation against his coaching staff for ambushing him the night before and being like, oh, look, I tried the centers. Oh, look, that guy missed a layup. Now we're going to go the tiniest route possible and play with no centers. You mess with me, I'm going to mess with you. I mean, it's either that or this guy has to be investigated because he's throwing out lineups out there that is throwing the game. He's throwing the game. And he just wouldn't stop. Look at all these different lineups that he threw out there, just completely and utterly nonsensical to close that second quarter. Jimmy Butler at the 4, Draymond at least back at the 5, but again, next to 3 guards on the floor at the same time. Steph Curry, Potts, Will Richard. Meanwhile, Potts can't hit the side of a barn in this game. He was absolutely awful and dreadful, doing nothing out there, an utter negative on the floor. And yet you're compromising the structure of everything for the Warriors defensively by throwing out a 3-guard lineup that is ineffective, isn't making any shots. The whole idea of going smaller is to be more efficient, effective, and deadly on the offensive end of the floor. These guys can't score anything, and they're a liability on the defensive end of the floor. There's no advantage for the Warriors running these lineups. You have to have an advantage and a good reason to go small, right? There's a reason for the smallness. And Steve Kerr is just sitting there watching his team give up 69 points without making any tangible adjustment. In that first quarter, Steve had 6 players come off his bench. Trayce played like a couple of minutes before he got yanked. And then there were 5 guards that came off his bench. 5 guards. You have Guy Santos, who is 6'8" and ready to go to balance out the various lineups that you have planned. Why is Steve Kerr throwing out 5 guards on the floor at the same time? I don't think any single individual on the planet can come up with a logical explanation for what Steve Kerr did in this game. Again, the Blazers are going smaller, but Deni Avdija is like 6'9". Kamara is 6'7". Jeremy Grant is 6'7". Chris Murray is 6'8". And their 2 smaller guys are Drew Holiday and Matisse Thybulle, defensive wizards. You see, there's a context to the Blazers going smaller. There is no context for what Steve Kerr is doing out there. Steve Kerr got utterly outcoached by a rookie coach in Tiago Splitter. Tiago Splitter ran circles around 10, 11-year veteran, one of the supposed greatest coaches of all time, Steve Kerr. Make that make sense. And the Blazers simply just had too much momentum going to begin the second half. The Warriors could do nothing to curtail that run by the Blazers. They will go on to score 70 more points in the second half of this game. The Warriors gave up 139 points to this team. How can you have the kind of performance that you did against the Nuggets and come up with such a difficult victory? Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Jimmy Butler are all playing on the back end of a back-to-back. These guys are willing to play to try to win this game, 3 games in 4 nights, and Steve Kerr is throwing out lineups that cannot beat any single NBA team in the league. Literally, the worst NBA team could beat the lineups that Steve Kerr threw out there tonight. Some more wonky lineups in that third quarter. Kuminga once again is at the power forward spot. At some point in this game, Kuminga was at the center spot. You can't sit there and tell me that Steve Kerr didn't completely and utterly sabotage this game. This guy is committing crimes out there, and it is absolutely mind-boggling. Just complete and utter injustice to the players on this team. The assistants were willing to team up and speak up against Steve Kerr in a low-key way last night. Are they willing to do more of that? Are they willing to get key players into the situation? And even though Steph Curry loves Steve Kerr and he's gonna protect and defend him and all these things, well, he's got to be able to logically defend what Steve Kerr did in this game. If the coaching staff gets together and gets these key players and have a word with them about what Steve Kerr is doing and whether any of it is justified, because I don't think the coaching staff got together at some point between last night's game and tonight's game and decided, you know what? We'll try 5 guards off our bench before the end of the first quarter in this game and see how that works out for us. Because literally 2 of his top assistants last night were willing to challenge Steve Kerr to go bigger, not the tiniest way possible. What happened in this game and the decisions that were made had to be Steve Kerr and Steve Kerr alone. Anyway, to close that third quarter, the Warriors were down by as many as 18 points. And then Steve Kerr kinda stopped screwing around and put out a normal lineup to end that third quarter, and they were able to go on a run and salvage the game from going completely out of hand. They had a 12-point deficit going into the fourth quarter. Surprise, surprise. Regular size guys at the spots that they should be in, and the Warriors were able to stop the Blazers' run, stop the bleeding, and go on an 8-4 run to end that third quarter. But then to start the fourth quarter, Steve Kerr decides to put out this lineup, the lineup that I utterly don't believe in because it bleeds points. There's too many holes on defense. They're not big enough. They're not strong enough rebounding wise. Potts gets burnt. Kuminga's non-impact. You got 2 guys that are lackadaisical on defense. The Kuminga, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green does not look strong defensively at all. They need a bigger guy in there to organize everything and put everybody into their natural positions. And you do the opposite of that when you go the small route instead and stick a small guy and Potts in there. As for Potts, the good news is that he got taken off the starting lineup. The bad news is that he keeps getting all the rope in the world. Guys like Guy Santos and TJD cannot make a single mistake without getting yanked out of the game, but Potts can do absolutely nothing out there and provide minimal contributions and just remain on the floor and allow 3-guard lineups, 4-guard lineups to exist out there all day. This roster, as currently constructed, is destructive. There's too many guards on this roster. Melton and Seth Curry are not even there yet, and they will be at some point. What are you gonna do then? Moses Moody, another guard, made his inglorious return. 1 of 6 from the field, did very little in this game. None of these guards took any kind of leap whatsoever. Not Moses Moody, not Potts. Buddy Hield, needless to say, GP2 is who he is. That's 4 guards right there. Now you add Will Richard to the equation. It's too many guards on this roster. The Warriors need to absolutely consolidate, get rid of some of these guys. I would say at this point, Potts is a non-fit for this team. The Warriors strongly need to consider moving him before going into next season, having him still on the roster and then being forced to fork out money for him when he doesn't really fit with this team. And when I say fit, I'm talking about being a viable piece for title contention. Potts isn't that guy. He's shown that defensively, he's not good enough. Will Richard is literally a better defender than him. Melton, by far, not even close. Worlds apart, better defender than Potts. I would argue there are even times where Buddy Hield may even be a better defender at times than Potts is. And yet he gets more rope than just about anybody. It doesn't make any sense. And you don't want to fork up a whole bunch of money to Brandon Podziemski when his rookie deal is up. I think Potts, Moody, Buddy Hield, these guys are all very, 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 very tradable. Bodies must be moved. Take Steve Kerr's toys away. I would say fire Steve Kerr, but they're never going to do that. So the only thing this team can truly do to make this situation right is for the front office to correct and make their team bigger so that no matter who Steve Kerr decides to go to, it's impossible for him to throw out the types of lineups that he ended up throwing out in this game. The Warriors are going to be able to squeak out more wins with Al Horford on board, and at least the fact that him being in that closing lineup is more or less established now. And combine that with the heroics of Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler, they should still be able to win a bunch of games. But these lineup combinations that Steve Kerr is putting out there, it's gonna make every game a challenge instead of being able to just blow teams out and be an actually dominant team like they're capable of being if better lineups are being formulated throughout the different segments of the game. I mean, you look at the Miami Heat, man. I saw a lot of Miami Heat fans being super upset in their first game where Spo decided to not use any center to close their game, and they ended up losing a close one. In tonight's game, Spo decided to put Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware in the starting lineup at the same time, and the Heat beat the Memphis Grizzlies by 40 plus points by halftime. At some point in that second half, they were up by almost 50 points. I think just about all the NBA teams are starting to completely get away from this tiny nonsense that Steve Kerr started, realizing that it's BS. It's not truly competitive basketball unless you have like 3 guards that are just complete and utter exceptions. Like OKC has some of those guys, right? And the Blazers tonight show that they have some of those guys. But they have mostly, like I said, a bunch of 6'7" guys and up. And those 6'7" guys and up, they actually play defense. The Warriors have given up 130 plus points in 2 straight games. They are not playing defense. Right away to start the season, they have exposed their weakness, where their weakness is. And that is the thing that they have to absolutely correct to do anything relevant this season. To be a true contending team and to be a truly serious team, they have some fixing up to do. And for all the improvements that Jonathan Kuminga has made in this season, they're all legit. He's doing a lot of things better, fundamentally better, passing better fundamentally. Although he had 4 turnovers to 3 assists in this game. And look, statistically, he's doing good things, and yet the Warriors are not winning those minutes. There's not enough two-way impact from him. And I really don't care if people think I'm just hating for no good reason. I see what I see for a reason. All I care about is this team viable? And is this team going to be ready to go into the playoffs with these certain pieces? And I don't see that from him. I think they're going to run into trouble if they go into the playoffs with him. He's going to run into these matchups, and they're going to see that he's not consistent enough on defense, and they're going to expose that, because that's what happens in the playoffs. If you have weaknesses, it gets exposed in the playoffs. Do I think that Kuminga, given some of the improvements in his game, could play something like a Jordan Poole role coming off the bench in the playoffs and just contributing to the team in a positive way? Maybe to some extent, but is that what the Warriors want to be doing with a guy that is getting paid $23 million to come off their bench and play like 20 minutes per game? I mean, you could do that, but it would be an awful inefficient use of $23 million of your roster. To be honest with you, I would trade Kuminga's better passing for better defense all day and night. If he could be a microwave scorer and be really good on the defensive end of the floor and be able to like shut some guys down and be a guy who can be relied upon for that, that's what this team needs the most, especially from the forward position. Do you not see that they have no POA on this team? That means their 6'7" ultra athletic forward must be able to do that job, and if he can't do it and nobody else can on this team other than 6'2" Melton, then they're missing a key ingredient going into the playoffs. Is it early to be talking about this? Maybe, but are the problems of the Warriors apparent from the jump? Yeah, and the problem with this is that things are not going to change anytime soon, not at least until Melton makes his return. When Melton makes his return, it's probably him who's going to have to be in that closing lineup. You know why? Because Melton is a better POA than Kuminga is. Even though he's only 6'2", 5 inches shorter than Kuminga, 4 or 5 inches shorter in wingspan. And yet Melton is more reliable as a defender, as a possession-by-possession defender, more reliable three-point shooter, more reliable playmaker. I can't emphasize this enough. The Warriors have Steph Curry, who is on fire, Jimmy Butler, a super legit second option, Draymond Green, still playing the defense that he's playing, Al Horford, super reliable stretch 5. If Kuminga is really that good, they should be blowing teams out and they should be on another level. And I think we're going to see that once you see a more reliable guy playing the role that Kuminga is currently playing right now. Oh, and by the way, Will Richard made some errors in this game, rookie-like errors, a couple of traveling violations, a couple of turnovers, fouling a three-point shooter when he had no business fouling that player. So multiple errors, and yet he got to stay on the floor despite him also being a part of a bunch of lineups that were a total negative. Steve Kerr's favoritism is absolutely ridiculous. This needs to stop, man. He needs to be an objective coach, stop playing favorites, and put out lineups that are going to make more sense. And if he doesn't do these things, the Warriors are going to continue to be in the thick of things in most games or suffer these horrible losses like they did tonight whenever Al Horford is out especially. And then before you know it, fun time is over. But you know what? Maybe that's what needs to happen for the front office to go and make another move that they need to make instead of being Mike Dunleavy and being like, oh, I think we have a really great roster and I don't think that we need to make a move. No, Mike, you absolutely need to make a move. Right now you are an unbalanced roster and you have an insane coach trying to manage it all. That's all I got for now. Hope you take a load off. The Warriors will be off for the next couple of days and then they'll have another back-to-back on Monday and Tuesday. Fun. In the meantime, I may try to put out a video or two showing some of the issues of the Warriors through the first 3 games. So do be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for watching. Steph Curry is the GOAT.